Hello, everybody. Welcome to the April 2026 Renewable Fuels Association Strategy and Innovation webinar. I got some special guests with us today. I've been wanting to do this one for a while. We have some folks from Golgix. I know some of you have had conversations with them, as well as I have as well. I've actually spoken with some of their customers as well. And they're going to talk a little bit today about AI integration into the ethanol industry. And if I'm honest, I would think that some of the AI use in ethanol is maybe not as mature as in other industries, and we're looking to change that a little bit. But today I have Nitin Rajan. He's the CEO of Golgix. I also have Charlie Scott, co-founder and CRO of Golgix as well as Jessica Morrison, which I know some of you have met at the various events. She's the VP of Partnerships and Growth. And the idea behind this is to give you guys an overview of what AI integration looks like in an ethanol plant. I know we got some case studies, some of those things that I've discussed with this group in the past. And we always talk, yield is king in an ethanol plant. And I liken it to, kind of high frequency, trading. If you give those guys a consistent second head start, you might as well give them a money printing machine. It's the same thing with ethanol plants. If we can see 1 or 2 hours into the future, we can ambush some of these problems before they happen. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Nitin, and they're going to obviously walk us through the Golgix opportunity and integration to kind of help us with not only helping our people, but making our plants as efficient as possible and refining some of our processes and SOPs that integrate into the system. So with that, Nitin, take it away for us, please.
Thank you, Ted. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. I will start sharing my screen in a second here to make sure it's visible to everyone. Good, Charlie? Yep, okay.
Looking good.
All right. Go back to the screen first. All right. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining. As Ted said, I'm Nitin Ranjan. I'm founder and CEO for Golgix. Today at this session, my plan is to walk you through what AI looks like in real inside of an ethanol plant, not a pitch deck version, but the actual production floor version, where we will go through 5 real case studies or use cases front to back at real facilities. Before we do that, wanted to provide some context as to why this matters right now. As we all know, demand is growing through 2030, thanks to E15 expansion. That's good news. But on the pressure side, every gallon you produce needs better yield, lower energy intensity, and a tighter CI score. And you're doing it, and on top of that, you're doing it with a leaner team than you had 5 years ago. The plants that can stabilize production, not just optimize each unit up from cook to dryer on a good day, those are the ones which has a consistent, or I would say, a competitive advantage going forward. So the bottom line is that the demand is growing, the teams are leaner, and stability is your competitive advantage. Every plant we walk into, we see a common pattern pretty much everywhere we go. The data shows us that there's a small disturbance, whether a meter is malfunctioning or a transmitter is not communicating correctly, or a technique is not followed through SOP or inconsistency in the techniques, CIP running 10 degrees cooler, things like that. And the problem with these small disturbances are that they don't announce themselves, they propagate. By the time you see the impact, it's downstream. It's in your firm yield, in your steam economy, in your CI score. And the root cause is almost 2 days, 3 days behind and 3 unit ops behind you. And that's the problem we built Golgix to solve. We wanted to build an AI system which can look at the whole plant together, not to replace your operator, but to give them the connections they can't see from a single screen. So with that, I will introduce our company, our solution to you, and then we will get into the case study. So Golgix is a human-centric AI production intelligence company. What we do is we empower operators with clarity, foresight, and guidance so they can make faster, better decisions on the plant floor. And that will help improve your yield, cut down variability. What we do, as I explained, production intelligence, but the way we do it is we have built an AI software and an agentic orchestration, which provides early warnings and deep dives, capturing your historian data and all the context which your people, your experts have, the tribal knowledge. We bring that both together into a single solution to provide you with early warnings, as that said, an hour, 2 hours before something is going to really bleed you out in the downstream recovery process. All of that can be mined and are visible. And our AI software and the agentic orchestration is doing that using the plant data you already have. And how we do it, most of the data we analyze, whether it's on the HPLC side or on the TCS historian side, they show us a very clean distribution. And the 95th percentile operation, which happens 5% of the time, has a mean in somewhere in the 70th on the 50th percentile. The means are basically because of hidden upsets we are talking about. Consistently you're hitting 93% firm efficiency or 99% distillation recovery, but suddenly you have few days or few batches which drops, and that pulls your percentile down, and it gets you to lower than what your absolute best looks like. So our job is to not redefine your peak. That's not who we are. Our job is to cut your bottoms. And what I mean by that is, like, how can we move that percentile, your median operation today, to your 95th percentile, working with you, collaborating with you. And that's what we are good at, and that's what our technology does. So with that, I will move into our case studies. And again, please feel free to put questions as I'm going through these case studies. I might get too technical sometimes, so happy to take a break. And if you have any questions, please let us know, and we will take it.
I should also say to everybody out there, if you have a question and you feel like it'd be easier to type it in the chat, I'll be watching that chat, and I think Nitin has eyes on that as well. So thank you for joining us today.
Perfect. All right. So we'll go through the entire flow. We'll go from all the way from slurry to, like I like to say, cook to dryer. So the first case study here, let's start with where your corn hits the water, right? So at this facility, the density meter will occasionally go flat, like just stop moving, right? And meanwhile, at the same time, the cooked solids were visibly changing. And the meter had silently faded, but nobody knew because the number on the screen looked fine. So for 148,000 gallons per day, every hour of that silent failure of off-spec feed walking straight into your fermenter made it worse, because your mash consistency is off now, and what you're expecting as your yield output is never going to be the same. And this problem gets further worse with the seasonal variability. The density target that works in October will not hold up in February, as we all know. But without a system watching whether the density, the slurry density or the lick density and your cooked solids are tracking together, not just whether the number looks right on the screen, but actually if they are moving in the right correlation or not, that drift doesn't show up until your yield drops the days later. And that is what we saw at this facility. Their cooked solids and their slurry density often on these red zones will detach from each other, and there will be variability in their mash. So what did we do for this problem? We enabled our, I should say, commissioned our early warning system that watched this slurry density and the cooked solids and whether they are tracking together or not. When they stopped tracking, it fired roughly an hour before. Bad feed will hit fermentation in 60 minutes if you don't flush your density meter. And that was the kind of like an early warning which goes out on as an email or as a in-app notification to the operator so they can go either flush the density meter, correct it, and move on. Just with that alone intervention, the yield was up by 1.08%. That's almost 0.034 gallons per bushel. And at the throughput of this facility, that's almost 605,000 gallons per year. With the rough math, that's 1.6 million annual revenue just from catching a broken meter an hour earlier. So this case study was all about, you watch the relationship, not just the empirical value, which the DCS puts up in the control room. And when you watch that relationship, and if that relationship gets broken, using our early warning system, we were able to catch that, feed quality failures, we call it, 45 to 60 minutes earlier. That was giving consistent results to the fermenters in the feed, in the mash consistency, and producing higher gallons per bushel. Going from slurry to prop here. And I have to admit that this one is uncomfortable. And I say that with respect because this is about an operator. So at this facility, we noticed cell count trending down plant-wide. Leadership of this plant couldn't tell if it was biological, equipment, or people. So when we dug in, we processed around 160 batches in this process, close to like 5,000 measurements. This is what jumped out, right? Batches with identical ethanol yield at around firm hour 25 was 7.9%, but the cell count varied 3.6 times. That's biologically impossible. And 23.5% of those batches showed cell count decreasing during the active growth phase. And we all know yeast doesn't do that, people do that. 60 to 70% of the measurement variance was operator technique, not equipment, not biology. And one operator was significantly above peers on variability across every stage, but nobody could prove it. It was just a gut feeling, but now it was data. So here's the results for that, right? And this fixed cost $0 in equipment. When we dug in with our deep dive on this particular case study, we found different ways operators were pulling wrong samples, and each one traceable to a specific cause. Like, for example, one of them being an operator had an actual vision issue affecting the microscope, and other one was new, really green at the job, and still dialing in dilution technique. So instead of chasing ghost, now a live dashboard at this facility tracks measurement consistency by operator. And the lab managers who were getting bombarded with like false alarms finally got quiet screens, and the ones who needed coaching got the right coaching. So this is, again, same kind of trend as you saw from the slurry to the prop, that the variability, every variability can be explained if caught early. And instead of chasing ghost, where we took a bad sample and we are trying to solve for something downstream that doesn't even exist, and it's just a measurement error. So finding these type of issues by looking at process holistically is the advantage we were talking about earlier. Okay, just give me a second here. All right, this is my favorite, and this is the big one, right? Fermentation, the heart of the ethanol facility. This facility averages around 13.53 ethanol concentration, but their swing in the output is plus minus almost 15,000 gallons per week. And if when we approached this facility and we started working with them, the plant leadership was super smart, right? They knew that if something as simple as before and after to explain this output variability, with fundamentally different conditions. And when I say fundamentally different conditions, what I mean is like we have to take care of sentinel variables like outside air temperature, the ambient conditions, the inputs cornstarch content, the flow rates, which changes season to season or day to day. All of those need to be considered before you can really isolate the reason behind the swing in the output gallons, right? So when we commissioned this site, we engineered our deep dive agents to go across 6 months of data to confirm this pattern. And here's what they found. Bad drop batch rate running around 20 to 30% plant wide. So that's how many bad batches they were dropping. And with a single fermenter hitting 57% bad rate in a single month and contamination signature clustering in specific weeks. So through our weekly pulses, through our deep dives, we were able to isolate that this problem was real. It was not just swing because of seasonality or input starch content. And it was really geared towards one of the fermenters, which was causing a lot of the upsets in the plant. And that yielded in the swing in the output of the plant. So what did we do, right? We basically normalized all of these sentinel variables like the ambient conditions, the starch content, the slurry, the flow rate, things like that, and stripped out these conditions to isolate what actual operational improvement versus what a good week of weather looks like. And the root cause we found was very simple. One was the CIP running too cool, letting bacteria outcompete the yeast, and also some dosing imbalance, which was causing yeast to tail off in, I think it was like hour 30 or 40 mark, from hour 30 or 40 mark. And the funny thing is, the operators always knew that there was something like this going on, but they just weren't able to prove it. So using this deep dive kinetics analysis, we were able to prove that if they moved their CIP from 180 to 190 Fahrenheit, as a result of that, just with that change, they were able to drop their overall contamination across all firms, not just that one firm. I think it was a fermenter 4 or something. Yeah, not just that one firm, almost 9%. And after that, when we tracked each of the metabolites, including glucose and ethanol across the 11 points per batch, we saw exactly where the batches were falling off. And that just the contamination, just the CIP change was able to eradicate that delta acids which we are seeing in the fermentation process. Further, on the tailing part of it, they tried to run different dosing of protease, right? They switched from 6 to 5. It was a trial they ran for like 3 days in and 3 days out, just to understand if with that they can change the kinetics of the plant or the fermentation process. But they saw that they dropped around 1,500 gallons per day production the same day when they switched the change. So within, like, they didn't have to wait even 3 days, but in the same day, they reverted back immediately. So they knew that the trial was unsuccessful and they need to run the protease the same way they were running at 6 gallons. And so through this contamination, to the CIP change and correcting the dosing, the results were that the yield was almost up by 1.8%. And it was not just up, but it was sustained over the 22 weeks. So it was a sustainable change with that CIP and dosing correction. And production variability went down from almost 14,000 gallons per week swing, which we talked about, to roughly 5,000. And that's 375,000 gallons annually of annual real gain. So again, why this is a big one, because we understood that most of the plant have similar configuration. Each fermenter should, on paper, behave identically, right? But there's still some variability, even though they are filled with same mash, same ambient condition, same CIP, but they have some type of variability. And studies like these find those variabilities, and we are able to solve that. I see a question.
Nitin, are you looking at Naresh's question right now?
Yep. If the measurement is in pi, so there's a question. If the measurement is in pi, pi can flag a stale value and alert as well. Yes and no, right? Pi can always alert you on a threshold, which is statically set in your historian or in your DCS. It will not dynamically adapt to the changes in the input or sentinel variables like input starch content, summer versus winter versus shoulder months like spring and fall. Or if you change your flow rate on your lake or your slurry side, those does change your kinetics a little bit. And to learn those dynamically and update those in Pi, I think that's a very difficult task for an operations team.
If I could just add, and Naresh, I'll put kind of I was writing a response that's in line with what Nitin was saying. I think this is less about managing to those static thresholds, which, as all of you know on this call, the target's always moving in your environment. Inputs are changing, etc. This is more about modeling the process to understand what should be happening based on all of the inputs and outputs involved, and flagging anything anomalous that's happening. And whether that anomaly is an absolute change or it's variability, that's what our solution's built to do. So I'll put that in the chat. If anybody else has any questions, feel free to chime in the chat or the Q&A, or jump in with a question.
Awesome. Thanks, Charlie. And thank you, Naresh, for the question. Moving on to the next slide, to the next case study here. Distillation and the recovery and efficiency. If I would take a poll, right, everybody in this room would want to run as the most efficiency point at any equipment stage, right, at any unit op stage. In distillation, I have seen plants run at 99.5% recovery, and that's what everybody wants to do. Everybody wants to be at, right? But once we dove into it, what we saw, the data told a different story than running at the highest possible capability of the plant. The relationship between the steam and recovery is never a straight line. And it is, how do I put it? Okay, it is a diminishing return curve when you consider unit economics, the cost of natural gas versus the cost of every gallon of ethanol you made from that. So we call it a knee point. Like there's a knee point at every facility. And at this one, it was around 13.2 steams per gallon, where you're getting the most recovery per BTU. Past that, you're burning gas for almost nothing back. And so without that visibility into that curve, operators default to more steam, better recovery. And especially given our current market condition, everybody is pushing more ethanol, high throughput period, where the instinct is to compensate. And steam economy ranges from around 11.85 to almost 12.25 with high variability. And operators don't know where the knee sat on any given day because it shifts with the changes in the feed composition and upstream firm quality and how much ethanol concentration is coming in the beer feed and things like that. So again, a dynamic problem where the instinct always is to overcompensate, push more steam so that we can recover more alcohol, reducing our beer column losses, side stripper losses and things like that. But then if you play in the unit economics into that percentage recovery does change a lot. So for that, we mapped and we built a trade-off curve, or I should say a trade-off model to build that curve at this facility. And a recovery efficiency against steam intensity across the full operating range. So as I said earlier, the current optimal point sits at 13.2 steams per gallon. Past that, every additional pound of steam costs more in natural gas than the ethanol it recovers. Further, we all know that plant do go through ups and downs, and you are trying to push more ethanol. When we try to um, commission the early warning with a very tight curve, we saw, an early warning fatigue, so to say. So instead of pushing for 95th or almost 100th percentile of accuracy, like this is where you should have your steam, pounds per gallon at, we relax that curve to 75% so that the alert frequency is not as much that it kills, it becomes a crying wolf for the, choice of better word here. But so we relax that alert frequency by reducing from like the golden point to like a silver point, and it was able to help operators actually have a controllable amount of early warning, see what distillation efficiency they should run at, which will give them the better unit economics and net result from that. And that part really matters for everyone who is watching CI score, right? Every unnecessary pound of steam per gallon directly increases your carbon intensity score. With 45Z and LCFS on the table, knowing your knee point isn't just energy optimization, it's CI score protection. And that knee point moves, right? As like every other use case we talked about here, the feed composition change, whether you are doing Milo, whether you're doing fully corn, you have some dry frac in there, your upstream feed fermentation quality will change accordingly. So yesterday's set point is wrong today because your knee point might shift based on the concentration in there. So having this dynamically computed, looking at everything holistically from your grind rate to your fermentation performance, and then adjusting for what your knee point looks like from how much steam you should push in the columns is super important if you're trying to protect your CI scores.
Hey, Nitin, I have a question. So we talked a lot about, natural gas optimization, steam production, make sure you're getting the value. You mentioned just a little bit, and I wasn't sure if I heard it or not, but is the cost of natural gas factored into that as well?
Yes. So if you look at, if you're just optimizing for say the beer column loss, right? And so if you just optimize for beer column loss, you're gonna try to push higher distillation efficiency, meaning you're gonna push more steam into it. So you'll try to pull that beer column loss from 0.03 below or around 0.03. But if you put the unit economics, the cost of natural gas into there and the unit cost of ethanol per gallon in there, you would see that sometimes it's not worth it to move your beer column loss hovering around 0.037 or 0.04 down in this condition. And you will let that, you reduce the steam accordingly. And that way your ultimate net gain is higher.
And then just a quick follow up. This one's maybe for me, and I know some other folks might have this as well. Can this be set to dynamically or be automated to follow that knee point curve depending on those inputs? I know that's a nervous question because we want to have a little bit of control over how we run our plant, but is there an opportunity for that, or is that something that is maybe the ultimate goal on something like this?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head with that question, right? So that is we are pulling in the futures data into our product now through APIs available to us where we can actually understand. Right now, a lot of people talk about corn oil because it's, the margins looks really good on that. And then you have ethanol price, you have natural gas price, all available. You can actually even forecast if your fermentation performance is going to be X and this much is going to be coming in your beer feed, what should be your knee point or how much steam you should be using. So yes, you can actually forecast based on the unit pricing of these commodities where you want to run your distillation recovery at so that you can get the best margin possible. And we have couple of producers who are working on that use case with us.
Okay. And then just the last one that just spurred another one. I'll shut up after this for at least a couple of minutes. Now, is it set up when you're working on this use case, is it set up to, Golgix AI says, hey, I'm going to make this change if you don't tell me not to? Like, is that maybe that's a better option, right? Instead of just having it do it on its own. But just how do you envision it working? I just kind of had that pop into my head at the last second there.
I don't think I would say this, right? Given the current cybersecurity, given the current data overlay from these third-party sources like futures and market conditions, right? I wouldn't recommend anybody to like write directly to their controllers, their DCS controller from our system, because I think AI is just getting there. It can provide excellent intelligence and recommendation, but there needs to be a human in the loop in order to make that correction, or at least validate that correction before doing it. But I've also seen some producers where certain decisions are being made constantly, that whatever we are seeing from the AI is pretty much common sense, and we need to not have a human in the loop. So the technology is there. We have the control there, but I don't think anybody has moved to that much faith yet.
Right. So we're not handing over the keys. We're still very much in control. We just have to, utilize that information in the best way with maybe some prompting or some suggestion, right?
Correct. And just a human, element, human intuitiveness in the loop, because sometimes somebody that change was intentional. They had to, they're planning in for a shutdown. So they were trying to blow out as much steam as possible from the recovery process, right? So having that level of context is not there on a day-to-day basis, which can be programmatically captured the system.
Tad, if I could lean in here, and again, wearing my commercial hat right now, I think the worst decision, well, maybe that's going a little bit too far, but the worst decision that a Tesla could make would be to take the steering wheel out of its driverless car. So like we have no desire to do that. And we've really built our company around helping people and empowering people. A lot of what you're seeing, and I think Nitin will get back to these case studies soon. A lot of what you're seeing is how do we create an expert solution that helps to scale the expertise you have. You have that, you can count on one hand the number of kind of managers, operators that you really rely on to operate your plant at peak. What if you could scale what they already know across your organization? And that's really what we mean about, like, let's cut off the troughs. Let's cut off the bottom. Let's move your distribution of your ethanol concentration or your yield up from the current average to the 70th, the 80th, the 95th percent. And certainly we're working with producers who are pushing beyond what they ever hit before. But really the value for everybody on this call, the immediate value that you can gain through AI is figuring out how do we repeat what we've done in the past, because I think almost every producer has meaningful enough distribution around their average that they can really, have a great year, have a great 3 years by just shifting that upwards towards what they've already accomplished. They just have trouble repeating.
Yep. No, and I'll just add one more layer of complexity on top of it, right? Like all these use cases we are talking about here, optimizing, whether it's your protecting your CI score or optimizing your fermentation operation or mass consistency, in everything, these are known challenges, and these are always going to be there, right? So if you think about the input feedstock variability, the input starch content change season by season, year by year, right? So factoring those in, I genuinely believe that the system is there, but it's not fully matured to have that level of control on the plant. So human is definitely needed to validate what decisions needs to go through the controls, what decision needs to be parked until the season gets corrected, or the plant is running more stable in the flow rate perspective, or having more control over the feedstock.
I guess, Nitin, it might be worth mentioning, if you look to other industries who have invested in advanced process control and really automating and kind of pushing logic straight to the PLC. The first case where you see that in industries is what logic can we build to prevent a safety issue? So I'm guessing, when we get to that point in this industry, that's where things are going to start. And then they're going to go to you guys take the same route mentally or the calculations or whatever to figure out what decision you're going to make in this specific context. That goes next because people are sick of doing the same thing and it's time consuming. But I think that the first case that we will see of AI writing to control will have to do with a safety application in this industry.
Right. Please, if anybody else has any questions, let us know. With that, I will move to the last part, the last case study here that ties it all together for us. And it's a hot topic as well on the industry around CI, and truly understanding upstream instability driving downstream energy waste. Right. We always talk about whenever we talk about CI score on the plant operation side, we associate everything to dryer energy because that is where the most natural gas is being used, right? So dryer energy is one of your biggest controllable cost and CI levers. But I would say most plants treat it as a back-end problem, and actually it's not. It's actually a holistic problem. It starts all the way at milling and cook and fermentation and propagates downward, as I have shown in the case studies. So for this facility, the pattern was very clear, right? Some of the rough fermentation weeks, and in the graph, maybe it's difficult to read, but those light yellow big bars are the spots where we had some stressed batches being dropped into the beer wall, right? So when we looked through this data, the pattern which emerged was very, very clear, right? Rough fermentation weeks, almost 50% bad batch rate in 1 week, and then say 43% in the another, showed up in steam economy spikes 24 hours, 48 hours later. And that is almost 0.4 pounds per gallon steam spread, which was not random, right? It was led by stress batches coming into the beer wall. And part of it is firm quality flowing downstream through stillage composition, evaporator behavior, and dryer load. And none of this would be a surprising news for any serious plant operator, right? They all know this is what happens. But you already know dryer behavior changes with feed quality. The point is most plants don't measure the connection. When you do, that intuition becomes actionable. You can see energy hit coming before it arrives at the dryer. So what we were saying earlier, a lot of these things can be perceived, or you can have foresight that that, okay, now I will have a dryer fluctuation or variation coming in. But what is the optimal energy intensity? Energy intensity we can run the downstream at, given what has already manifested at the front end, is key in protecting your CI score. And that is what we are seeing, that a lot of the variability in the steams, pounds per gallon can be explained if you really monitor and understand the variability introduced by your front end process. So, and that's what we have kind of wanted to present to the audience today, was to understand through these case studies, going all the way from cook to dryer, how it manifests in the on the dryer side, right? On the energy intensity or the energy efficiency side. And we have quantified in this entire 5 case study approach that we saw contamination reduction by 9%. We saw variability in your output gallons by reduction of 70%, where the swings are not happening anymore by reducing that contamination. And this case shows that how same engine extends into the back end, connecting batch quality to metrics plant leadership actually cares about, which is steam cost, natural gas intensity, and CI score. And so if we can control the variability or solve the variability upstream, you have a direct effect downstream as well. So now we are actually further working in this use case to, I think we are going through like almost 3 years of data here to explain what, fermentation performance or fermentation quality explains the thermal variability we are seeing on the dryer side versus what is just inbuilt downstream inefficiency. So having that clarity will further help that producer control this 0.4 pounds per gallon swing, which we are seeing on the steam side for them. So I would say the takeaway from this one is simple, right? Fermentation stability isn't a fermentation KPI. It's a full plant margin lever. The plant that measure cook to dryer as one system will find a margin improvement that plants managing each unit operation in isolation or silos will miss.
Counterintuitive sometimes, right?
Yeah. And the funny part is like, the most experienced plant operators or experts we have worked with, they all know this is the case. They just don't have the means or the tools or the holistic view from cook to dryer to really ascertain the impact. Like, what is the impact of it? And when there is no impact conceptualization, people don't make that a priority to solve.
Right. Or I'm swing shifting and I'm just not there, and there's an issue that is going to manifest 2 days after I'm gone, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Super interesting. So you talked again, guys. I think you can unmute yourselves. If you can't, raise your hand. I'll get to you. But I have a couple of questions. You mentioned earlier. You mentioned about alert fatigue, and then also, I'll add another one, decision fatigue, right? So we can have all the data, all the millions of data points, and we can't be blowing our email up with alerts. And then also, decision fatigue. What do I do when this happens? How do we integrate? Like, SOPs are great, but you got to follow them, right? They're necessary and you got to follow them. How can we kind of integrate or set up the system to integrate, plant level SOPs into these alerts and these decision matrices?
Great question, and I love that question because it will take me to my history of Golgix, right? So, Golgix, we were a pattern recognition company. Like, we were an AI company before ChatGPT became a thing, right? So ChatGPT came around and became a tool at like 2022, 2023 is when everybody started hearing about AI. But we are an AI company since 2020, and we are a pattern recognition company. At that time, it was all about data and machine learning and AI, right? So you were able to process data, you were able to build prediction model, neural networks, pattern recognition. Since 2021, when the LLM got introduced to the concept of AI and then the agents came along, now AI systems can not only process data, they can also process context, like plain text they can process. So that gave us the biggest advantage in our technology, in our roadmap, that now we were able to input SOPs, input context, input shift notes, input maintenance notes, input operational logs, things like that, which people maintain on a clipboard, on an Excel sheet, on some CMMS platform or MES platform. But now we had the way to just input them as it is without massaging them, changing them, trying to do a lot of text recognition, which we used to do prior to 2021. So pulling that all together, I couldn't agree more with the decision fatigue as to people always get overwhelmed, right? If you have too many decisions to make. So what we have done in our solution is we call it a pulse. Like there is a pulse mechanism in our software, a daily pulse, a weekly pulse. What is a daily pulse? Daily pulse is something which tells you whether your plant is running well or not. And is it persistently going down or not? Why that's important? Because nobody wants to intervene or have that cognitive load every day when they walk into the plant saying that, what all things I have to fix. But with a 60-second tap up, like a 60-second read of the entire plant metrics, whether it's running well or not, and where the problem is brewing, it really helps with taking that decision fatigue out of the equation, because now they're consistently seeing the same source of information consuming in 60 seconds, and they know what to plan their day with, or what meetings they need to attend, or who they need to talk to. And then same thing, when we analyze on the weekly basis, all these daily pulses, all the SOPs you talked about, or we talked about one of the case studies around cell count where operators were not pulling the samples correctly, things like that. All of that gets discovered on a weekly pulse basis. So a weekly pulse is more of a summary of every early warning, every daily pulse, every SOP techniques misfollowed into one report, which gets consumed by our producer on once a day, 1 day per week. Sorry, not once a day, 1 day per week. And we actually are the AI partners, right? We are not a software vendor. So we actually consume that report with them, walking through that collaboratively to understand what chronic process issues, technique issues, training issues we need to address together in order to apply those SOPs correctly, make that weekly pulse and daily pulse more effective in targeting the problem you have. And the beauty of doing it this way is it's an organic motion. It doesn't feel like, oh, we're going to go work on this project and then this project, not knowing whether that project, once it's solved, is going to sustain its value or not. Because all these activities results in an early warning system. And so whenever we finish a project, we move on, we know that the agent is watching 24/7, that one problem we solved, so that if ever drifts away from that norm, or it's not sustained, it's going to raise his hand again in the future weeks.
So we mentioned, automation. We also, had the term, cybersecurity come up, right? You mentioned that, and that's been super sensitive. Like, RFA has done, internal trainings for our staff, and we could continue to do that. And I think last year we also had a cybersecurity training just for our members, to share the things that we learned. And one of the questions, that has come up is, where's my data? Who has it? Where's it live? Where does Golgix live? Walk me through that on where everything is at and who has access.
Awesome. Great question again. You're just fighting it out, huh? So this is, Charlie and I have spent a lot of time together working in oil and gas before even Golgix, right? And we learned with that experience that when it comes to industries, biofuels, oil and gas, data is very sensitive. It's almost a competitive advantage for producers, right? So we architected this solution in a way that it can live behind our producer's firewall. And when we deploy our technology, though we are agnostic to any architecture, but we purposely put one architecture on top of everything, is where we deploy on-prem, meaning behind their firewall. So their data lives behind their firewall. The data never leaves outside their firewall trying to hit our API or any cloud service to get processed and provide this intelligence. That way, we are completely, no IT team hates us, because they don't have to change any cybersecurity rules or policies or firewall rules as a part of that. And they can, they can use our solution behind their closed firewalls and make decisions. So any learnings which comes out of that also stays behind their firewall. Anything they document, anything they write down, any SOP they upload, everything stays behind their firewall, not leaving, no data leak happening to the outside world.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for that.
I think just following up on that
ahead.
really quickly, Tad, something that for the audience, for people looking to start exploring AI, or maybe you already are, something that you should look out for in the agreements that you're signing with potential partners or on a pilot or a full-fledged deployment is who owns the data. And in our case, our clients own their data. And just really high level example. And I actually need to research this, but like the simplest thing is, like, if we're talking about social media or something, you make a post, you don't own that, right? And what I need to check is in ChatGPT, right? If you enter a question, you don't own that question anymore. When you enter basically data, or you transfer data into our solution and it processes it and it gives you back intelligence, you own that data still. So I think that's been a very important piece of this puzzle, and something that people should consider when they're making decisions with an AI partner.
Right. So we're almost to the end. I got a few more just for my own curiosity. And so, I'm an ethanol producer. What's it look like? Walk me through, initial, brainstorming and conceptual, integration, and then, what does the relationship look like going forward? Kind of walk me through that piece.
Sure. So how we start an engagement with a typical ethanol producer would be, we will first provide a user demo, I would say, like how do you use our technology, right, with your current means. But that is to say, so that you can touch and feel how the technology looks like, you understand the capabilities part of it. But the engagement starts with us looking at your data first. So we typically request 6 months of HPLC data, because that's easy to provide from a producer's perspective, and they usually have that already pulled in. So we take that data to go through and show opportunity in the data. So it's called an opportunity assessment. It takes us less than a week to flip it around once we get the data, and provide them with the understanding of the distribution. What does their 95th percentile looks like? What does the 90th looks like? What does 70th? What does 50th looks like? And the whole goal with that is to understand, is there opportunity available to move the needle or not? Like cutting off those bottoms we talked about on this thing. Once that opportunity assessment is done, and we are able to ascertain that there's opportunity and the producer wants to take advantage of reducing that variability and moving their mean to their 95th percentile. That's when we engage. We engage as we are a SaaS, so it's an annual subscription we engage with. And the reason for that is also because everybody knows how the AI technology is evolving. Every month you get a notification from one of the sources you follow that the models have changed and the new agents have come up and the new technology has come up. So we are following the same thing. We are actually beating some of those updates which comes to the market. We already know that's happening, and we have already imported that AI model or things into our firewall as well. And that way we keep our model accurate. So our partners or the producers we are working with, they're always getting the best model out there in the world, which again, it's about tuning the accuracy to the point where it's never falling behind. So that is why it's a partnership and not just a software vendor relationship, where our technology, what it looked like on day one, looks the same at day 365. That's never going to be the case, because it evolves and it learns and it gets updated periodically. So it's a subscription service. Now, we also make sure that if somebody doesn't see the value they're getting right from this relationship, they do have a way to like cancel after 6 months. That has never happened to us, but again, we give that flexibility. We want to make sure that nobody feels that it's a 3-year marriage or 2-year marriage. It's an annual subscription. It renews every year. If you don't see the value, you can cut bait in 6 months from it. And when all of this, we have maintained one thing: fixed pricing. So we offer fixed pricing. If somebody is using our technology to generate more than we initially business cased or understood the variability, that's their gains to keep, not us to share. So it's a fixed pricing model. We take they pay consistent, like a quarterly fee or a biannual fee or an annual fee, depending upon what their payment terms are. And that way, we are able to give them the most flexibility and the least risk possible in trying AI and AI systems and see if they can move the needle on their plant.
Right. Thanks. All right. So just with a couple minutes left, we'll kind of do, key takeaways. I'd like to hear from you guys on, what you see in the industry and how it works going forward, and as well as kind of give us an overview of the Golgix opportunity, sounds like, and what's up next for you guys?
Sure, Nick. So, I just wanted to pull this slide together as to throughout this webinar, we wanted to stress one point, right? That across all of this, it's all about variability, right? It's all about variability which gets introduced because of feedstock changes, because of upsets, because of changes in the outside air conditions, which you cannot control, right? And usually these upsets start anywhere in the plant, but because a lot of the tools out there looks at unit operations, right? They look at slurry, they look at cook, they look at distillation in isolation, they miss the trend. They miss the common pattern, where it starts, where it falls, right? And they spend a lot of time in trying to discover where this actually began. And that is the killer in all of this, right? So why that is the case? Because as often the root cause is hidden, not because the team, your folks aren't good, but because no human can connect a slurry meter drift which happened at 6 a.m. to a steam spike, right? Which is happening 72 hours later in a dryer in a single shift. So they were not even there, right? So this is not a people problem. That's a visibility and a decision intelligence problem, which we are trying to solve. To give them that context, give them that visibility, give them that foresight to see something happened here, which is going to transpire. So let's not chase downstream. Let's change the problem where it happens at the first place. And because of the way we have deployed the solutions our producers, we are able to get to that early enough to not become a cascading effect throughout the system. And people are trying to solve something which didn't even start there. And at the end of the day, I will leave this with the plants that have the plants that will pull ahead from here won't be the ones with the best corn or the newest equipment, right? They will be the ones that detect earlier, like catching a transmitter failure 45 minutes early, for a bad feed into fermentation, or isolate faster, like providing in a week that 60% of measurement variance you saw in the prop technique was not biology, it was human error, right? Or stabilizing operation like production swings, which we are seeing due to fermentation, bad batch drop rate, and improve yield. So when we talk about improving yield, improving energy intensity, reducing energy intensity, or CI, we should not talk about them in silos. We should talk about them simultaneously because they are all interconnected. And that's what a best resilient plants looks like in the future. And the data to build it is already there in their historian today.
That's awesome. I guess, I'll leave everybody with this, in honor of the masters, which started today. This group has heard me talk about, a kind versus difficult learning environment. And one of the examples I like to use is, golf is really tough. We all know that, but it's a kind learning environment. And you say, well, what do you mean? Well, after you swing that club, your feedback is immediate. Like, exactly, you may not know what happened, but something happened and it wasn't intended. Ethanol plants, we joke a lot and we say, hey, we're just making booze, but it's not a kind learning environment. There's things that happen long before you see the fruit of that mistake or that opportunity or that right decision. And so I think that the technology and the opportunities that you guys can uncover, like you said, they're hidden, is a super interesting opportunity for ethanol producers to take advantage of. So with that, appreciate your time. Thank you. And then again, I'll send this out after I edit it down a little bit. So appreciate your guys' time. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Ted. Thank you, everyone.